I think it's important to step back and really look back at the situation at the border that existed last year and really the past 4 years up until recently when the MPP Remain in Mexico program was discontinued. That was actually a crisis where we were intentionally separating families, taking children from their parents, creating these massive refugee camps along the border in Mexico, disregarding our own immigration laws related to asylum and humanitarian relief, politicizing the immigration courts. And all that may be known to the people on this call, including the attorneys and members of the press, but it's important to remember how little of it was known to the general public because it was quite literally hidden. It was hidden in those camps in Matamoros and Tijuana, hidden in the secret tent courts set up with no public access. Last year, Greg and I, as part of an AILA delegation, went down to Harlingen and Brownsville, and we were denied access to what should be public court appearances. And we also crossed over to Matamoros to see the conditions there. And for the tens of thousands of migrants that were put into Remain in Mexico, it's also important to remember that those cases did have hearings. But again, many of those were in those closed tent courts, but thousands were also in immigration courts along the border in cities like San Diego and Harlingen. And what was really already an extremely backlogged court system got even worse. And so those cases of the MPP Remain in Mexico, they really just took over those courthouses. Looking at the situation now, we are seeing migrants that are now being allowed into the U.S. That includes those that were in the MPP, children, but it's being done in a fairly transparent way, so we at least see what's happening openly. And I can tell you that the vast majority of those migrants are then traveling on, with permission, to other cities to stay with family, friends, sponsors, as their asylum cases proceed. But now distributed, a bit more evenly throughout the country's immigration courts, and that's actually easing some of the burden that was building up over the last few years. So I suppose that the point is that the prior administration's policy included this sort of out of sight, out of mind strategy that in some ways worked for them by making the crisis that they created a hidden one. But for those that have essentially been freed from MPP, the ones allowed into the U.S. now, they will be able to pursue their asylum claims in a much more acceptable and humane process. In other words, not from a tent in a camp someplace. They'll have the opportunity to present their cases, seek legal assistance from attorneys. I just can't overemphasize how rigged the system was against them during MPP. Asylum cases are complicated. They require evidence, the ability to research and gather documents. And these people were, literally living in tents in Mexico, a foreign country to them, without even regular phone access, little chance of legal representation. And that really explains why the asylum grant rate for those that were forced into MPP was somewhere around, I believe it was 1.5%. And that's compared to about 30% for those that were not in MPP for the same time period, which is a fairly shocking disparity. Having said that, there are still some significant areas of concern that we're seeing, like Jennifer mentioned, including those Title 42 expulsions, which we know include legitimate asylum seekers who nonetheless are being turned away. So one of the questions is what's happening to them? For those that fled intolerable conditions in their home countries, they can't return. And many of our own AILA members and other advocates have reported on people who were forced back to their home countries and in short order killed. So many of them are also going to find themselves essentially destitute along the border in what are some of the most dangerous cities in the world. They're going to fall subject to gangs, extortion, sexual exploitation. And we also know that traffickers will take advantage of this situation and offer, even coerce migrants to be smuggled into the United States. And many won't survive that journey. They'll die along the way from the conditions, or they'll be killed, raped. And we know that families in the United States are often contacted by these smugglers and extorted. So we still hope to see the administration continue to find solutions that are fair and safe and reasonable and transparent, and that comply with our own immigration laws and our own traditions of treating migrants with dignity.